Bambi was slowly soothed down by this conversation, but he remained thoughtful. Right above him, in among the branches of an alder tree, an impressive tawny owl shrieked. But Bambi was confused and forgot, for once, to show that he was startled. The owl, however, still came down to him and asked, "Give you a shock, did I?" "Of course," answered Bambi. "You always give me a shock." The owl gave a quiet laugh. He was satisfied. "I hope you don't blame me for it," he said. "It's just the way I do things." He fluffed up his plumage till he looked like a ball, sank his beak into his soft, downy feathers, and put on a terribly nice, serious expression. That was enough for him. Bambi opened his heart to him. "Do you know," he began in a way that seemed older than his age, "I've just had a shock that was far bigger than the one you gave me." "What?" asked the owl, no longer so satisfied with himself. Bambi told him about his meeting with his enormous relatives. "Don't tell me about your relatives," declared the owl. "I've got relatives too, you know. But all I have to do is look round me anywhere in the daytime, and they're all over me. Nah, there's not much point in having relatives. If they're bigger than you, they're good for nothing, and if they're smaller, they're even more good for nothing. If they're bigger than you, then you can't stand them 'cause they're so haughty, and if they're smaller, they can't stand you 'cause they think you're haughty. Nah, I don't want to know anything about anything of that." "But I don't even know my relatives," said Bambi shyly and wishing he did. "I'd never heard anything about them, and today was the—" "Don't you bother about those people," the owl advised him. "Just take my word for it," he said, rolling his eyes in a meaningful way. "Take my word, that's the best thing to do. Relatives are never as good as friends. Look at the two of us. We're not related, but we're good friends, aren't we? And very nice it is, too." Bambi was about to say something more, but the owl continued speaking. "I've got some experience in things like that. You're a bit young still. Take my word, I know better about these things. And anyway, I don't see why I should get involved in your family matters." He rolled his eyes, and rolled them in a way that seemed so thoughtful, and sat with an expression that seemed so earnest and meaningful, that Bambi was modest and said nothing. Chapter 8. Another night went by, and the following day something else happened. The sky was cloudless, and the morning was full of dew and freshness. All the leaves on the trees and the bushes suddenly had a more vivid scent. The meadow breathed the air in broad waves and lifted it up to the tree-tops. "Peep!" said the tits as they woke up. They said it quite quietly, but as it was still twilight and the sky was gray, they said nothing more for a little while. For a time there was silence. Then the raucous, rasping sound of a crow came from high up in the air. The crows had woken up and were visiting each other in the treetops. The magpie answered straight back, "Shakerack-shack, can you believe this? I'm still asleep." Then hundreds of calls, here and there, far and near, tentatively began, "Peep, peep, dew." These sounds still had something of sleep, something of the twilight about them, and yet they were actually all quite distinct from each other. Suddenly a blackbird flew up to the top of a fir tree. He flew right up to the very highest, thinnest point, reaching into the air. He sat high up there and looked out over all the other trees, near and far, while the pale gray sky, still tired from the night, began to glow in the east and come to life. Then the bird began to sing. She was only a tiny dark spot if you glimpsed her from the ground. In the distance her little black body looked like a wilted leaf. But her song spread out all over the forest in great celebration, and then everything came to life. The finches struck up, and the robins and the goldfinches made their voices heard. Pigeons rushed from one place to another with wide flapping and swishing of their wings. The pheasants shouted out loud as if their throats would burst. The sound of their wings was gentle but powerful as they swooped down to earth from the trees where they had been sleeping. On the ground they repeated their metallic, bursting cry many more times, and then they would coo gently. High in the sky, the falcons called out their sharp and joyful, "Ya, ya, ya, ya!" The sun had risen. "Diu, diu!" rejoiced the oriole. As he flew back and forth between the twigs and branches, his round yellow body shone in the beams of the morning sun like an exhilarated ball of gold. Bambi stepped under the big oak tree on the meadow. It sparkled in the morning dew, had a scent of grass, flowers, and wet earth. It whispered of the 1,000 lives it had led. There sat Bambi's friend, the hare, and he seemed to be thinking about something very important. There was a haughty pheasant there, walking slowly. He pecked at the stalks of grass and looked carefully all around himself. His dark blue neck sparkled in the sunlight like a jewel necklace. But close in front of Bambi there stood one of the princes very near to him. Bambi had never seen him before, had never even seen any of the fathers this close up. He stood there before him, very close to a hazel bush, and still slightly concealed behind its twigs. Bambi did not move. He hoped the prince would come out fully from behind the bush, and he wondered whether he could dare to speak to him. He wanted to ask his mother and glanced around for her, but his mother had already gone ahead and stood a long way away with Auntie Aina. Just then, Gobbo and Feline came out of the woods and ran onto the meadow. Bambi did not move, but wondered about what he should do. If he wanted to get over to his mother and the others, he would have to pass by the prince. He thought that would be unseemly. So what, he thought, I don't need to get my mother's permission first. It was the old prince who spoke to me first, and I didn't tell my mother anything about it. I will speak to the prince. I'll see if I can. I'll say to him, "Good morning, your highness." There's nothing about that might make him cross. And if he is, I can just run away. Bambi wondered whether he had made the right decision, and it kept on making him feel unsteady on his feet. Now the prince stepped away from the hazel bush and onto the meadow. Now, thought Bambi. Just then there was a loud clap of thunder. Bambi recoiled and did not know what had happened. He saw how the prince jumped high into the air in front of him and saw him rush past him into the woods. Bambi looked hard all around himself. He felt as if he could still hear the thunder clap. He saw his mother, Auntie Ina, Gobbo and Feline, some way away, had fled into the woods. He saw his friend the hare rush away in a panic, saw the pheasant run away with his neck stretched out ahead of him, and he could not understand what it all could be about. The prince lay there. A broad wound had torn his shoulder open. He was bloody and dead. "Don't just stand there," came a shrill cry from beside him. It was his mother who was running at a full gallop. "Run," she called. "Run as fast as you can." She did not stop but rushed on, and her command pulled Bambi along with her. He ran with all his strength. "What is that, mother?" he asked. "What was that, mother?" His mother, gasping for breath, answered. "That was him." Bambi shuddered and they ran on. Finally, out of breath, they stopped. "What do you say? Please, what do you say?" called a thin voice from above them. Bambi looked up and saw the squirrel hurrying down to them through the branches of the tree. "I jumped all the way here beside you," he called. "No, it's terrible." "Were you there when it happened?" asked Bambi's mother. "Well, of course I was there," the squirrel replied. "I'm still shaking from it. All my limbs are shaking." He sat upright, his magnificent flag against his back, showing his slender white breast and pressing both his front paws against his body to reassure himself. "I'm quite beside myself with fear. I'm afraid too, and it's made me quite numb," said Bambi's mother. "I can't understand it. None of us saw anything." "Really?" The squirrel became excited. "You're wrong there, you know. I'd been watching him for a long time." "So had I," called another voice. It was the magpie. She flew up to them and sat down on a branch. "And me," called another screeching voice from even higher in the ash tree. There was the jay sitting there, and from the very tops of the trees there was a pair of crows who cawed angrily. "We saw him too," they interjected. They all sat round in earnest discussion. They were exceptionally agitated and, it seemed, full of anger and fear. "Who?" thought Bambi. "Who have they seen?" "I did everything I possibly could do," the squirrel assured them as he pressed both his forepaws to his heart. "Really everything to bring him to the attention of the poor prince." "So did I," the jay screeched. "I don't know how many times I shouted to him, but he just didn't want to hear me." "He didn't hear me either," the magpie said with a laugh. 10 times it was I called to him. Just as I was going to fly over to him, I thought to myself, well, if he can't hear me, I'll fly over onto that hazel bush, just where he's standing. He's got to hear me from there. But that was just when it happened. "But my voice is louder than yours, and I did all I could to warn him," said the crow in a bitter tone. "But you posh lot never give enough attention to birds like us." "Yes, never enough at all," agreed the squirrel. "We do what we can," thought the magpie, "but it's not our fault if somebody's unlucky. He was such a handsome prince," the squirrel lamented, "and in the prime of life." "Ho! Honk!" the jay screeched. "If he hadn't been so standoffish and paid a bit of attention to us." "He was certainly not standoffish," the squirrel contradicted him. The magpie added, "Nah, no more than the other princes like him." "Stupid, then," the jay laughed. "You're pretty stupid yourself." A crow called down from above them. "You can't talk about being stupid. The whole forest knows how stupid you are." "Me?" retorted the jay in astonishment. "No one can accuse me of being stupid. A bit forgetful sometimes, but I'm certainly not stupid." "Suit yourself," said the crow, now serious. "Don't forget what I've just said, but bear in mind that it wasn't being haughty or stupid that cost the prince his life. It's 'cause you can't get away from him." "Ugh!" screeched the jay. "I don't like talking like this." He flew away. The crow continued speaking. "There's even a lot in my family who, he's tricked. He kills anyone he feels like killing. There's nothing we can do about it." "You've just got to keep a watch out for him," the magpie added. "Yeah, you certainly do," said the crow sadly. "Cheerio." She flew away and her family went with her. Bambi looked around. His mother was no longer there. "What are they talking about?" he thought. "I can't understand everything they're saying. Who is this he they're talking about? It must be he that I saw in the woods that time, but he didn't kill me." Bambi thought of the prince whom he had just seen lying in front of him with a bloody, shredded shoulder. He was now dead. Bambi walked on. The forest was again in song with 1,000 voices. The sun drove its broad beams of light through the treetops. Everywhere was light. The leaves began to steam. High in the air called the falcons, and here, close by, a woodpecker was laughing out loud as if nothing had happened. Bambi did not become cheerful. He felt under threat from something dark. He could not understand how the others could be so gay and carefree when life was so hard and so dangerous. At that moment he was gripped by the desire to get a long way away from there, to go deeper and deeper into the woods. He felt the urge to go to a place where the trees were at their densest, where he could find a corner to slide into, a place surrounded broad and far by the most impenetrable undergrowth, where he could not possibly be seen. He did not want to go back out onto that meadow. Something gently moved in the bushes beside him. Bambi was greatly startled. There, in front of him, stood the elder. There was something twitching in Bambi. He wanted to run away, but he took control of himself and remained. The elder looked at him with his big, deep eyes. "Were you there when it happened?" "Yes," said Bambi quietly. His heart was beating so hard he could feel it in his mouth. "Where is your mother?" the elder asked. Bambi answered, still speaking quietly. "I don't know." The elder continued to look at him. "And you're not calling out for her?" Bambi looked into that venerable ice-gray face, looked up at the elder's majestic crown, and suddenly found himself full of courage. "I can be by myself too," he said. The elder looked at him for a while, and then softly he said, Are you not the little one who, not very long ago, was crying for his mother? Bambi felt slightly ashamed, but continued to be courageous. Yes, that was me, he admitted. The elder looked at him in silence, and it seemed to Bambi that these deep eyes were watching him with more tenderness. You told me off for it, elder prince, he exclaimed, for not being able to be by myself. I can do now, though. The elder looked at Bambi, examining him, and smiled very slightly, barely noticeably, but Bambi did notice it. Elder prince, he asked trustingly, what happened back there? I can't understand it. Who is this he they're all talking about? He stopped, shocked at the dark look that bade him to be silent. They said nothing for a while. The elder stopped looking at Bambi and stared into the distance. Then he said slowly, Listen for yourself, smell for yourself, watch for yourself, learn for yourself. He raised the crown on his head even higher. Farewell, he said, then nothing more. And then he had disappeared. Bambi, dismayed, stayed where he was and wanted to give up hope. But the prince's farewell was still in his ears and gave him some comfort. Farewell, the elder had said, so he wasn't cross with him. Bambi was filled with pride, felt that he had been lifted out of something that was formal and serious. Yes, life was hard and full of danger. Let it bring whatever it wants, he would learn somehow to bear all of it. Slowly he walked deeper into the woods. Chapter 9. The leaves were falling from the big oak tree at the edge of He Meadow. They were falling from all the trees. One of the branches of the oak was much higher up than the others, and it stretched a long way out over the meadow. At its tip there sat 2 leaves together. Things ain't like they used to be, said one of the leaves. They ain't, the other answered. There were so many of us last night who were just about the only ones left here on this branch. You never know who it's going to happen to next, said the first. Even when it was nice and warm and the sunshine gave you some heat, you get a storm or a cloudburst sometimes, and lots of us got torn off then, even them that were still young. You never know who it's going to happen to next. You don't get much sunshine these days, the second leaf sighed, and even when the sun does shine, there's no strength to it. You've got to get your strength from somewhere else. Do you think it's true, pondered the first. Is it true that other leaves will come along and take our place once we've gone, and then another lot, and then another lot? Course it's true, whispered the second, only we can't work out how. It's above what we can understand, that is. It'd make you really sad and all, the first added. They remained silent for a while. Boy! Then the first said quietly to himself, What do you have to go away for, anyway? The second asked, What happens to us after we've fallen? We sink down. And what is it? What's down there? The first answered, I don't know. Some say one thing, others say something different. Nobody knows, really. The second asked, Do you think you feel anything? Do you think you know anything about yourself when you're down there? The first answered, Who can say? None of them who've gone down there has ever come back to tell us. They were again silent for a while. Then the first leaf said tenderly to the other, Don't get yourself all upset about it. Here, you're shivering, look. Oh, don't bother about that, the second answered. Anything makes me shiver these days. You just don't feel properly attached to where you are, do you? We'd better stop talking about things like that, said the first leaf. Yeah, we'd better leave it, the other replied. Only, what we going to talk about now, then? They became silent, but after a short time resumed the subject. Who do you think's going to be the first of us to go down there, then? It won't be for a while yet, the first reassured him. Let's just think about how beautiful it used to be, how wonderfully beautiful. When the sun came out and burned us so hot it seemed we'd just swell up with all the good health it gave us. Remember? And then there was the dew, early in the morning, and the lime trees, wonderful nights. The nights are horrible now, whined the second. "They never seem to come to an end." "We can't complain," said the first leaf gently. "We've lived longer than so many others." "Have I changed much?" the second leaf asked, shyly but emphatically. "Not a bit," the first assured him. "What, 'cause I've gone all yellow and ugly?" "No, it's gone a bit different for me." "Oh, give over," the second contradicted. "No, honest," the first repeated emphatically. "It's true what I'm telling you. You're as lovely as you were on the very first day. Might be a few yellow stripes here and there, but not so's you'd notice, but they just make you look all the lovelier. Honest." "Well, thank you," the second leaf whispered, feeling quite touched. "I'm not sure I believe you. Well, not everything, but thank you for it. You are so good to me, and you always have been. It's only now that I'm starting to understand how good you've always been to me." "Oh, stop it now," said the first, and became silent himself. He could not talk any more because he was upset. Now they were both silent. The hours passed. A damp wind blew cold and hostile through the treetops. "Oh, now," said the second leaf, I. His voice broke off. He was gently removed from his place and fluttered down to the earth. Winter had come. Chapter 10. Bambi noticed that the world had changed. It was hard for him to get by in this altered world. They had all been living like rich people, and now they began to find themselves in poverty. But wealth was all that Bambi had ever known. He took it as a matter of course to be surrounded by the greatest excess and the finest luxury on all sides, to have no worries about finding food, to sleep in a beautiful room hung with green that no one could see into, and to walk about in a majestically smooth, glossy red coat. Everything was different now, and he had not really noticed it, not properly. The change which had taken place had been for him just a sequence of short-lived appearances. He found it entertaining when milky white veils of mist drew the morning dampness up from the meadow, or when they would suddenly sink down from the twilight sky. They were so beautiful as they dissipated in the sunlight. He liked the frost, too, which surprised him when he saw the ground and the meadow strewn with white. He spent much time luxuriating in the sound of his grown-up relatives, the stags, as they shouted. The whole forest would rumble from the voices of these kings. Bambi would listen and be very afraid, but his heart would thump in admiration whenever he heard this thunderous call. He thought about the crowns worn by these kings, so big and with so many branches like a majestic oak, and he would think their voices were just as powerful as their crowns. Their imperious commands rolled out in the deepest tones, the monstrous groans of noble blood as it rushed around their bodies and seethed with the ancient power of yearning, haughtiness, and pride. Whenever Bambi heard these voices, he felt overwhelmed by them, but he was proud to have such distinguished relatives. At the same time, he felt a peculiar, excited irritation at their being so unapproachable. That hurt him, that humiliated him, although he did not know exactly why or even how he could come any closer to knowing. It was only when the king's time for love-making was over, and their thunderous cries went silent, that Bambi started paying attention to other things once more. When he walked through the woods by night or lay in his room by day, he heard the whisperings of the leaves as they fell through the trees. The rustling sounds as they trickled down through the air from every treetop, every twig, were incessant. The gentle, silvery light of the moon ran continuously down to the earth. It was wonderful to wake up to it, and it was delicious to go to sleep with this mysterious, sad whispering. The leaves at that time lay deep and loose on the ground, and when you walked through them they crackled loudly and they rustled quietly. It was fun to have to push them aside with each step because their layers were so deep. They made a shh. This was also very useful, as during these times there was no need to make great effort with listening and smelling. Everything could be heard from a long way off. The leaves rustled from the slightest movement. They cried out, "Shh! Who could possibly sneak up on you? No one." But then came the rain. From early morning to late in the evening it poured down. It struck and splattered from late in the evening and all through the night until back to the morning, eased off for a little while, and then began again with new strength. The air seemed full of cold water. The whole world seemed full of it. Your mouth was filled with water if you only tried to gather a few blades of grass, and if you pulled at a bush, then water would gush down into your eyes and up your nose. The leaves on the ground no longer rustled. They lay there soft and heavy, pressed down by the rain, and made no sound at all. Bambi, for the first time, learned how vexing it was to have water streaming down on you all through the day and all through the night, and to be soaked to the skin. He was still not very cold, but he yearned for warmth, and he thought it was miserable to have to move about while soaked through and through. But then, when the stormy weather came down from the north, Bambi learnt what it really means to be cold. It was little help to cuddle up close to his mother. At first, of course, he liked it very much to lie there and be nice and warm, at least on one side. But the stormy winds raged all through the night and all through the day and all through the forest. It seemed to be driven by an incomprehensible ice-cold fury, an insane rage that wanted to tear all the trees up by the roots and carry them away, or to destroy them in some other way. The trees roared as they put up powerful resistance. They fought bravely against this immense attack. You could hear their long, drawn-out groans, the sighs of their creaking. There was a loud bang when one of their mighty boughs split, the angry crack when, here and there, the trunk of a tree would break, the cry of pain from all its wounds as its body was overpowered, split and killed. But then it became impossible to hear anything more, as the storm fell onto the forest with even greater violence, and its roars drowned out any other voice. Bambi now understood that a period of need and poverty had begun. He saw how much the rain and the storms had changed the world. There were now no leaves on any of the trees or bushes. They stood there robbed of all they had. Their whole body was naked and could be clearly seen. They looked pitiful as they stretched their naked brown arms up to the sky. The grass on the meadow was limp and dark brown, and so short it seemed to have been burnt to the ground. Even the place where Bambi and his mother slept seemed pitiful and bare now. Since its green walls had disappeared, it offered no privacy, and the wind blew in from every side. One day, a young magpie flew over the meadow. Something white and cold fell into her eye, then another, and laid a light veil over her sight. Little, soft, dazzling white flakes were dancing all around her. The magpie flapped her wings and nearly stopped, but then directed herself upward and went higher in the sky. In vain! The soft, cool flakes were there again, and again they fell onto her and into her eyes. Once again she directed herself upward and rose even higher. "Just don't bother, love," called a crow from above her who was flying in the same direction. "Just give it up. You can't fly high enough to get out of these flakes. That's snow, and it—" "Snow?" said the magpie in amazement as she struggled against each new flurry that came at her. "Well, yeah," said the crow. "Winter's here." "That's snow, that is." "Forgive me," answered the magpie. "I only left the nest in May. I don't know what winter's like." "Yeah, there's a lot like that," the crow observed. "You'll soon find out, though." "Well, if that's what snow is," thought the magpie, "I'd like to sit down for a little while." She went down and sat on a twig on an alder tree and shook herself. The crow flew lazily on. At first, Bambi was pleased to see the snow. The air was still and mild, the white stars floated in the sky, and everything in the world looked entirely new. It had become lighter, even gayer, thought Bambi, and for the brief periods when the sun came out, everything lit up, the white covering sparkled and shone with such power that it was quite dazzling. But Bambi soon stopped being pleased about the snow, as it was becoming harder and harder to find food. You had to scrape the snow aside, and that took a lot of effort before a small patch of limp grass was exposed. And the snow cut into your legs too, so that you had to be careful not to get your feet injured. Gobo already had done. But, of course, that is what Gobo was like. He was never able to endure very much, and he caused his mother a lot of worry. They were together now for almost all of the time, and they also had more company than previously. Ina would often call by with her children. Morena, a girl who was nearly grown up, had also begun to mix in their circle. But it was probably old Mrs. Nettler who came by for a chat most often. She was quite alone and had an opinion about everything. "No," she said, "I want to have nothing more to do with children. That's a pleasure that I've really had enough of." Then Feline would always say, "Why's that then, when it's a pleasure?" And Mrs. Nettler would pretend to be cross and say, "It's a bad sort of pleasure, and I've had enough of it." Everyone enjoyed chatting very much. They sat next to each other and talked. The children had never had as much to listen to. Even one or two of the princes came and kept company with them now, somewhat shy with them. But that passed quite quickly, and then there was a pleasant atmosphere. Bambi admired Prince Rano, who was an impressive gentleman, and he felt a tempestuous love for the young, beautiful Caris. They had cast off their crowns, and Bambi would often stare at the two round, slate-gray discs on their heads where glamour, splendor, and many tender points could be seen. Caris seemed very elegant and distinguished. It was tremendously exciting when one of the princes would tell him about what had happened to him. On Rano's left foreleg there was a big lump which was now overgrown with fur. He would often ask, "Have you ever noticed how I limp on this leg?" Everyone was prompt to assure him that no one had ever noticed any limp at all. That was what Rano wanted to hear. And it really was true to say that it was barely noticeable. "Yes," he would then continue, "I escaped from something very dangerous that day." And so Rano would go on to recount how he had been taken by surprise by him and hurled fire at him. But he was only hit here on his leg. It hurt so much it could drive you mad. But it was only here, on his leg, that he had been hit. It hurt nearly enough to drive him crazy, no wonder. The bone had been shattered. But Rano did not panic. He got up and went on just 3 legs. He kept going despite the pain, as he was well aware that he was being chased. He ran and ran until night fell. Then he allowed himself some rest. But the following morning he moved on again until he felt he was in safety. Then he groomed himself, hidden and alone, and waited for the wound to close up. Eventually he came out of his place of safety, and he was a hero. He had a limp, but that was barely noticeable. Now, when they were all together in one place, so often and for so long, when so many stories were told, Bambi heard more about him than he ever had before. They talked about how horrible he was to look at. Nobody could bear looking into this pale face. This was something that Bambi already knew from his own experience. They even talked about the smell of him that spread all around, and here, too, Bambi would have been able to contribute to the discussion if he had not been too well brought up to join in with the conversations of grown-ups. They said this scent was of a rather puzzling sort, always changing but instantly recognizable, as it was always remarkably stimulating, unidentifiable, mysterious, but in itself rather disgusting. They talked about him only needing 2 legs to walk on and about the wonderful strength of both his hands. Some of them did not exactly know what hands are, but Mrs. Nettler explained it to them. "I don't see anything surprising about it. The squirrel can do everything you've just mentioned and does it in just the way he wants to, and every little mouse can do the same." She turned her head disrespectfully away from them. "Oh!" the others exclaimed, and they made her understand that it's far from being the same thing. But Mrs. Nettler was not to be intimidated. "And what about the falcon?" she declared. "What about the buzzard? And the owl? They've only got 2 legs, and when they want to take hold of something, as you call it, they just stand on one leg and hold it with the other. That's a lot harder to do, and I'm sure he can't do it." Mrs. Nettler was not in any way inclined to admire anything about him. She hated him with all her heart. "He's disgusting," she said, and nothing would change her mind. And there was nobody who contradicted her, as there was nobody who found him very lovable. But the matter became even more confusing as they talked about it, saying he had a third hand, not just 2 hands, but a third hand as well. Mrs. Nettler's reply was curt. "That's just an old wives' tale," she concluded. "I just don't believe it." Now Ronald joined in. "So what?" he asked. "And what do you think it was that he used to shatter my leg? Just tell me that, will you?" Mrs. Nettler gave a glib retort. "That's your affair, my love." "He's never shattered anything of mine," Aunt Ina said. "I've seen lots of different things in my life, and I think there must be something in it if he insists he's got a third hand." Young Carus observed politely. "I can only agree with you there." "There's a crow who's a friend of mine." He stopped in embarrassment for a short while and looked at all the people there as if he were afraid of being laughed at. But when he saw that they were listening to him and giving him all their attention, he continued. "The crow is exceptionally talented. I can't deny that. She's astonishingly talented. She told me that he really does have 3 hands, but not all the time. It's that third hand, the crow told me. That's the nasty one. It doesn't grow out of him like the other 2. He carries it hanging on his shoulder. The crow says she can always tell whether he or any of his kind is dangerous or not." "If he comes along without that," Mrs. Nettler laughed. "This crow of yours is just stupid, Carus. Take it from me, my love. If she was as clever as she thinks she is, she'd know that he's always dangerous, always." But the others had something to say too. "But there are some of them who are not dangerous at all," Bambi's mother thought. "You can see it straight away." "So what?" asked Mrs. Nettler. "Do you just stand there till they come up to you and say hello to them?" Bambi's mother answered softly, "Of course I don't just stand there. I run away." And Feline burst out with, "You should always run away." Everyone laughed. They continued talking about this third hand, and as they did so they became more serious, and the sense of the horror of it came among them. Whatever it was, a third hand or something different, it was something terrible, something they could not understand. Most of them knew about it only from what they had been told by others, but some of them had seen it with their own eyes. He would stand there a long way off without moving. There was no way of explaining what he did or how it happened. But there would suddenly be a bang like thunder, fire sprayed out, and even at that distance from him you would collapse with your breast torn open and you would die. They all lowered their heads while she told them this, as if they were pressed down by some dark force that had some inexplicable power over them. They listened eagerly to the many different accounts of seeing him, and every story was full of horror, full of blood and suffering. They took all this in and still wanted to hear more of what was being said. Stories that must have been made up, all the fairy tales and legends they had heard from their grandfathers and great-grandfathers, and as they listened they unconsciously learned, while still afraid, about how to make peace with this dark world, or, at least, to run away from it. "How does that happen?" asked young Carus, quite dispirited. "That he can be so far away and still knock you down?" "Didn't your clever crow explain that to you?" sneered Mrs. Nettler. "No," said Carus with a smile. "She says she's often seen it, but no one knows how to explain it." "Well, he can even knock the crows down from the tree when he feels like it," observed Ronno. "And he knocks the pheasants down from the sky," Auntie Ina added. Bambi's mother said, "He throws his hand out there. That's what my grandmother told me." "Does he really?" Mrs. Nettler asked. "And what is it that makes that horrible thunderous noise then, when his hand tears itself away from his body?" Bambi's mother explained. "There's a flash of fire and it makes a bang like thunder. On the inside, that's all he is, just fire." "Excuse me," said Ronno. "There is some truth in saying he's nothing but fire on the inside, but it's wrong to say it's his hand he uses. A strike from a hand could never cause injuries like that. You can see it for yourselves. It's much more likely to be a tooth that he throws at us. Think about it. That would explain a lot. And so you die because he bites you." Young Karas breathed a deep sigh. "Will he never stop chasing us down?" Then Morena spoke. The girl was now nearly an adult. "That means that one day he'll come and join us and be as gentle as we are. He'll play games with us. Everyone in the forest will be happy, and we'll make peace together." Mrs. Nettles shrieked with laughter. "It's best if he just stays where he is and leaves us alone. You shouldn't say things like that," Auntie Enna admonished her. "And why not, then?" retorted Mrs. Nettles as she became more heated. "That's really not something I could imagine. Make peace with him. He's been murdering us for as long as we've been able to think, and our sisters, and our mothers, and our brothers. For all the time we've been in the world, he never leaves us in peace. He kills us whenever he sees us, and you want to make peace with him? That's just so stupid." Morena looked at everyone with her gently sparkling eyes wide open. "There's nothing stupid about making peace," she said. "We've got to make peace." "I'm going to get something to eat," said Mrs. Nettles as she turned round and ran off. Chapter 11. The winter went on. Sometimes it became milder, but then the snow would come again, and each time it did, it lay higher on the ground so that it was impossible to scrape it away. Worst of all was when it became warm enough for it to thaw, and then the snow that had melted into water would freeze when the night came. Then there would be a thin layer of ice which you could easily slip on. It would also often break, so that the sharp splinters would cut the deer's tender fetlocks, cut them bloody. But now there was a hard frost which had lasted for days. The air was clean and thin, such as it never had been before, and the frost was full of strength. It began to tinkle with a sound that was fine and high. It was so cold that the air sang. Everything was quiet in the forest, but something shocking happened every day. One time the crows attacked the hare's little son, who was already lying down ill, and killed him in a gruesome way. His cries of pain were long and pitiful and could be heard by all. Bambi's friend, the hare, was away at the time, but when he heard the sad news he could not contain himself. Another time, the squirrel was running around with a serious wound on his neck from where the polecat had bitten him. By some miracle, the squirrel had been able to get away from him. He could not speak because of the pain, but he ran between all the twigs and branches. Everyone could see it. He ran like a madman. From time to time he would stop, sit down, raise his forepaws in confusion, take hold of his head in his shock and his suffering, and as he did so his blood gushed over his white breast and turned it red. He ran around like this for an hour, then he suddenly collapsed, fell hard against the branches of the tree, and fell, dying, into the snow. A pair of magpies immediately came down on him and began their feasting. There was also the time when the fox attacked the pheasant and tore him to bits, even though everyone liked and respected the pheasant for his beauty and his strength. His death was a cause for concern far and wide, and everyone felt sorry for his inconsolable widow. The fox had snatched the pheasant out of the snow he had settled in, and where he thought he was well hidden. No one could feel safe any more, as all these things happened in broad daylight. It seemed that the penury they were suffering would never come to an end, and it spread bitterness and ruthlessness all around. It made all experience worthless. It undermined the conscience, destroyed all trust and all good manners. There was no mercy anymore, no peace, no holding back. It's impossible even to think that it might ever get any better. Bambi's mother sighed. Auntie Ina sighed too. and it's impossible to think that it ever was any better." "Don't be silly," said Marina, looking straight ahead. "I think about how lovely it used to be all the time." "Listen," Mrs. Nettler said to Auntie Anna. "Your little one is shivering, isn't he?" And she pointed to Gobbo. "Does he always shiver like that?" "Sad to say," answered Auntie Anna, somewhat worried. "He's been shivering like that for several days now." "Well then," said Mrs. Nettler in the open way she had of saying things, "I'm only glad I haven't got any children any more. If he was my little one, I'd be worried about whether he gets through the winter." Gobbo indeed did not look well. He was weak. He had always been less strong than Bambi or Feline, and had not grown as fast as those two. But now he looked worse from day to day. He could not keep his food down, what little there was of it now. He was in continual pain. So, with the cold and the difficulties of life, he had lost all of what strength he had. He shivered all the time and could barely hold himself upright. Everyone looked at him with concern. Mrs. Nettler went to him and gave him a friendly push in the side. "Now don't you be sad," she told him sternly. "That's not right for a young prince, and it's bad for your health." She moved away from him because she did not want anyone to see how concerned she was. Ronno was sitting in the snow to one side, but now he jumped up. "I don't know what that is," he mumbled and looked all around. Everyone paid attention. What is?" they all asked. "I don't really know," Ronno repeated. "But I'm worried. All of a sudden, I'm worried. It's as if there were something wrong." Chorus had tested the air. "I can't smell anything odd," he declared. They all stood there listening and testing the air. "Nothing. I can't smell anything," they all said, one after the other. "But still," Ronno persisted, "you can say what you like, but there is something wrong. The crows have been calling," said Marina. "They're calling again now," added Feline quickly, but by now the others had heard them too. "Look, that's them, flying," Karis pointed out to the others. Everyone looked up. Above the tops of the trees, crows were flying away in swarms. They came inwards from the outermost edge of the woods, from wherever it was that the danger was approaching, and spoke anxiously to each other up there. It was clear that there was an exceptional disturbance of some sort. "There, wasn't I right?" asked Ronno. "You can see that there's something going on. What are we to do?" whispered Bambi's mother uneasily. "Get away from here now," insisted Auntie Ina in alarm. "Wait," commanded Ronno. "Wait, with all the children here?" Auntie Ina contradicted him. "When Gobbo won't be able to run." "All right then," Ronno conceded. "You get away from here with your children. I don't see any point in it, of course, but I don't want to have you blaming me for it later." He was serious and decisive. "Gobbo, Feline, come this way. Not too fast. Go slowly." "Stay behind me," Auntie Ina admonished them. She, with her children, slipped away. A time went by. They stood still, listening and smelling the air. "That's all we need," Mrs. Nettler began. "We've got to put up with all of this, and now this is all we need." She was very cross. Bambi looked at her and felt that she was thinking of something dreadful. Now the magpies were also coming out of the same part of the thicket as the crows had come, 3 or 4 at a time. "Look out! Look out!" they cried. They still could not be seen, but their loud warnings could be heard one after another. "Look out! Look out!" Now they came nearer, continued to flap their wings, shocked and disturbed. "Hawk!" the jays cried, yapping loud in their alarm. Suddenly, and all at the same time, all the deer came together. It had seared through them as if they had been hit by something. Now they stood still and breathed heavily. It was him. There was a frenzy of smelling the air like never before. There was now nothing left to examine. The smell entered their noses, befogged their senses, and made their hearts freeze. The magpies were still playing about. The jays above them were yapping. But now there was agitated movement everywhere. The tits swished between the branches, hundreds of little feathery balls, and they chirruped away, away. The blackbirds rushed dark and lightning fast above the trees with long drawn-out screams of chirping as they flew. The deer looked down at the white snow through the network of bare twigs on the bushes and saw a confused rush of small, shadowy figures as they ran to and fro. They were the pheasants. Further away there was a shimmer of red. That was actually the fox, but no one was afraid of him now, for continuous, broad waves of that dreadful smell wafted to them, breathing alarm into their minds and uniting them all into one crazy fear and into one feverish desire to flee, to save themselves. This mysterious, overpowering scent permeated the wood with such power that they could tell that he was not alone this time, but seemed to have come with all his friends, and things were at their most extreme. They did not move. They watched the tits as they hurried away with frantic flapping of their wings. The blackbirds, the squirrels, rushed away, leaping from one tree top to another. They thought these little ones had no good reason to be afraid, but they nonetheless understood why they fled when he could be smelt. There was no creature in the forest who could bear to have him anywhere near. Now our friend, the hare, hopped away hesitantly, sat still, and hopped further. "How does it look?" Chorus called to him impatiently. But our friend, the hare, just looked around, madness in his eyes, and could not speak straight away. He was very disturbed. "What's the point of asking?" said Ronno grimly. Our friend the hare gasped for breath. "We are surrounded," he said in a monotone. "There's no way out on any side. He is everywhere." Just then they heard his voice. 20 times, 30 times, he called out, "Ho ho! Ha ha!" It rang out and shook them more than thunder and lightning. It struck the trunks of the trees which trumpeted the sound out. It brought them horror. It threw them down. A distant rustling and cracking of the undergrowth as the bushes were pushed apart and the sound forced itself over to them, the screams and bangs of twigs as they broke. He was coming. He was coming right here into the thicket. Now behind them they could hear short whistles and trills. Already there was a pheasant there standing up as he heard his steps. They heard the flapping of the pheasant's wings fading as he rose high into the air. A flash and a clap of thunder. Quiet. Then the muffled sound of something hitting the ground. "The pheasant has fallen," said Bambi's mother with a shudder. "The first," added Ronno. Then Morena, the young girl, spoke. "There are many of us who are going to die very soon. I might be one of them." No one listened to her. Now the great terror was among them, Bambi tried to think. But the raging noise, which he was raising higher and higher, tore all his thoughts apart. Bambi could hear nothing but this noise, a noise that made you numb, and in among all this howling, bellowing, and banging he could hear the thump of his own heart. All he felt was curiosity, and was completely unaware that all his limbs were shaking. Now and then his mother came close to his ear and said, "Stay with me," she shouted, but in all that uproar it seemed to Bambi that she was whispering. This, "stay with me," offered him some support. It held him fast as if he were held in place with a chain, otherwise he would have run away without a second thought, and he always heard it again just when he would have lost self-control, fled. He looked around. There was a crowd of many different people running around in a blind panic between each other. A pair of weasels ran past, slender lines like a snake which it nearly impossible to follow with the eye. A polecat listened spellbound for all the information he could get from the stuttering, confused hare. The fox stood there among the disordered rush of the pheasants. They paid no attention to him, ran right past his nose, and he paid no attention to them. Without becoming excited, his head stretched forward, his ears pointing up high, his nose working hard, he strained himself to hear through the tumult as it came closer. The only thing moving was his tail. It looked as if he were straining to think. A pheasant hurried past, out from behind, out of the most serious danger, and he was in a panic. "Don't go up there," he shouted to the other birds. "Don't go up there. Just run. Don't let them get you. Nobody go up there. Just run, run, run." He kept on repeating the same thing as if he were trying to warn himself, but he no longer knew what he was saying. A clamor of "Ho ho! Ha ha!" seemed to come from somewhere quite close. "Don't let them get you," called the pheasant. At the same time, his voice suddenly became a whistle-like sobbing. With a loud rattle, he spread his wings and flew upwards. Bambi watched him as he went, flapping his wings loudly, flying up directly and steeply between the trees, his resplendent body glittering with its metallic dark blue gold-brown sheen, as majestic as a precious gem. His long tail feathers swept proudly behind him like the train of a gown. The curt thunderclap rang out sharp. The pheasant in the sky collapsed suddenly into himself, twisted himself round as if trying to snap at his feet with his beak, and hurtled heavily to the ground. He fell in the middle of the others and moved no more. Now no one was able to stay calm. They all rushed around away from each other. 5, 6 pheasants rose into the air with noisy clattering. "Don't go up there!" shouted the others as they ran. The thunderclap came again, 5 times, 6 times, and some of those who had flown up in the air fell back to the ground lifeless. "Now come with me," said Bambi's mother. Bambi looked up. Ronno and Karas had already gone. Mrs. Netla had also disappeared. Only Morena was still with them. Bambi went with his mother. Morena demurely followed them. All around them there was upheaval, loud cracks, bellowing, and thunderclaps. Bambi's mother stayed calm. She was trembling, just slightly, but she kept her thoughts together. "Bambi, my child," she said, "always stay right behind me. We've got to get out of here and across the clearing. But here inside we need to go slowly." The bellowing became more hurried. The thunderclaps came 10, 12 times, thrown out from the hands of him. "Stop that," said Bambi's mother. "Don't run." "Once we've gone past the clearing, then run as fast as you can. And Bambi, my child, don't forget you shouldn't pay me any attention once we've reached the outside. Even if I fall, pay me no attention. Just keep going, keep going. Do you understand, Bambi?" His mother made deliberate steps through the booming noise. The pheasants ran in all directions, pressed themselves into the snow, jumped out again, started to run once more. The whole family of the hare jumped here and there, sat down, ran again. No one spoke a word. They were all exhausted with their fear, crippled by all the bellowing and by the thunderclaps. Ahead of Bambi and his mother it was getting lighter. Through the cagework of the bushes shone the clearing. Behind them, getting closer and closer, there were startling bangs that rattled on the tree trunks, the cracking of twigs as they broke, the yells of "ha-ha" and "ho-ho." Now their friend the hare with his 2 young rushed past close beside them and into the clearing. Bang, ping, bam! The thunder crashed. Bambi saw the hare did a somersault as he ran and fell with his pale belly facing upwards and then just lay there. He twitched a few times and then he was still. Bambi stood there as if made of stone, but from behind he heard shouts of, "They're there! Everyone, just get out!" A widespread rustling of wings as they hurriedly unfurled, whistling, sobbing, swoosh of foliage, flapping. The pheasants rose up, lifted themselves up almost all at the same time like the straw in a sheaf. The air burst with many thunderclaps, and the muffled impact of the fallen could be heard as they hit the ground. The fine whistling of the survivors rang out as they flew away. Bambi stopped and looked back. There he was. He was coming out from the undergrowth here and there again. He was appearing everywhere, striking everywhere, damaging the bushes, drumming on the tree trunks, and shouting terrifying cries. "Now," said his mother, "straight ahead, and don't come too close behind me." With one leap she was out of the woods, so that the snow merely threw up a few flakes. Bambi hurried after her. They were attacked by the sound of thunder from every side. It was as if the earth had been ripped in half. Bambi saw nothing. He ran. The urge to get away from this tumult had been accumulating, away from the steam of the storm that whipped everything up, from the gathering urgency to flee, the wish to save himself. All these were now unleashed. He ran. It seemed to him that he saw his mother fall, although he did not know whether she really had done. He felt a veil around his eyes. It had been thrown over him by the fear of the thunderclaps booming all around him, which had now broken out. He was unable to think, unable to see. He ran. The clearing was now behind him. A new thicket took him in. From behind him came another shout, another sharp thunderclap, and in the twigs above there was a very brief rattling, like a first spray of hailstones. Then it became quieter. Bambi ran. A pheasant with a twisted neck lay dying on the snow, twitching his wings weakly. As he heard Bambi approach, he stopped his spasmodic movements and whispered, "It's finished!" Bambi paid him no attention and continued running. He found himself in a tangle of undergrowth that forced him to slow his pace and look for a path. He kicked around himself impatiently. "Over here!" called somebody in a broken voice. Bambi had no choice but to follow it, and immediately found himself in a place where he could walk. But in front of him somebody was struggling to get to her feet. It was the hare's wife. It was her who had called. "Do you think you could give me a little help?" she said. Bambi looked at her and was shocked. Her rear legs dragged lifeless through the snow, which was red and beginning to melt from the warm blood that dropped from her. She said once again, "Do you think you could give me a little help?" She spoke as if she were perfectly all right, relaxed and almost gay. "I don't know what's happened to me," she continued. "It's certainly not anything important, but at the moment I can't walk." As she spoke, she sank down onto her side, and she was dead. Bambi once again was horrified, and he ran away. "Bambi!" He stopped abruptly. That was one of his own people. It was heard again. "Bambi, is it you?" There was Gobbo stuck helplessly in the snow. He had no strength at all and could not even get onto his feet. He lay there as if he had been buried and merely raised his head weakly. Bambi went over to him in some agitation. "Where's your mother, Gobbo?" he gasped. "And where's Feline?" Bambi spoke quickly, agitated and impatient. In his anxiety, his heart continued to beat hard. "Mother and Feline had to go," answered Gobbo in despair. He spoke gently, but as earnest and as wise as a grown-up. "They had to leave me lying here. I've had it. You've got to go too, Bambi." "Get up," Bambi yelled. "Gobbo, get up. You've been resting long enough. There isn't any more time for that. Get up. Come with me." "No, just leave it, Bambi," answered Gobbo quietly. "I can't stand up." "It's impossible. I wish I could come with you. You know that, but I'm just too weak." "What's going to happen to you then?" Bambi persisted. "I don't know." "I expect I'll die," said Gobbo simply. The shouting started again, and the sound of it came over to them. Between the shouts, new thunderclaps. Bambi was alarmed. There were rapid bangs and cracks from the undergrowth. Rumblings sped across the snow, and in among the uproar young Carus came galloping over to them. "Run!" he called when he saw Bambi there. "Don't just stand there. Anyone who still can run, run." He went past them in an instant, and his headlong flight yanked Bambi along with him. Bambi was hardly aware whether he had started running again or not, and it was only a while later that he said, "Farewell, Gobbo." But by that time he was already too far away. Gobbo could no longer hear him. He ran through the woods, penetrated by the noise and the thunderclaps that seemed to be seeking him out. He ran around until it was evening. When darkness swept down, it became quiet. There was soon a light wind blowing, helping to blow away that horrible storm that had been raging far and wide. But the terror remained. The first person Bambi saw whom he knew was Rano. His limp was worse than ever. "Over there, where the oaks are," Rano said. "The fox is there, lying wounded. I've just come past him. It's terrible, the way he's suffering. He's biting at the snow and in the earth." "Have you seen my mother?" Bambi asked. "No," answered Ronald shyly, and he quickly went away. Later in the night, Bambi came across Mrs. Nettler with Feline. All three were very glad to see each other. "Have you seen my mother?" Bambi asked. "No," replied Feline. "I don't even know where my mother is." "No," said Mrs. Nettler cheerfully, "and that's a fine mess for me. I was glad when I didn't have to put up with children anymore, and now suddenly I've got two of them I've got to look after." "Thanks a lot." Bambi and Feline laughed. They started talking about Gobbo. Bambi told them about how he had found him, and that made them so sad that they began to cry, but Mrs. Nettler wouldn't allow them to cry. "You've got to see that the most important thing now is to find something to eat. It's unheard of. We haven't had a bite to eat all day." She led the two of them to a place where there was still some greenery hanging low and still not quite dried out. Mrs. Nettler was exceptionally well informed. She did not touch anything herself, but urged Bambi and Feline to take a good meal. At places where she knew there was grass, she pushed the snow aside and ordered them, here is a good place," or she would say, "Wait, we can soon find something better than this." But between giving this advice, she would grumble, "This is so stupid. Children are so much trouble." Suddenly they saw Auntie Ina coming and they ran up to her. "Auntie Ina!" Bambi exclaimed. He was the first to have seen her. Feline was beside herself with joy and jumped up to her. "Mother!" But Ina was crying and she was dead tired. "We've lost Gobbo," she lamented. "I've been looking for him. I've been to his sleeping place out there in the snow where he collapsed. It was empty. He's gone, my poor little Gobbo." Mrs. Nettler grumbled. "You'd do better to try to find out which way he went. That would be more sensible than crying." "There are no tracks to show which way he went," said Auntie Ina. "But he left lots of tracks. He was there where Gobbo was sleeping." They were all silent. Then Bambi asked timidly, "Auntie Enna, have you seen my mother?" "No," replied Auntie Enna quietly. Bambi was never to see his mother again. Chapter 12. The meadow had long since lost its catkins. Everything began to turn green, although the young leaves on the bushes and the trees were still small. Shimmering in the tender light of early morning, they showed a smiling freshness and seemed like little children when they have just woken up. Bambi stood in front of the hazel bush, striking his new crown against the wood. That was so enjoyable, and it was also necessary, as the glory of his head was still wrapped in velvet and fur. They had to come off, that was a matter of course, and no one with any sense of tidiness would just wait for them to fall off by themselves. Bambi swept his crown so that the coating of velvet was torn into shreds, and long strips of it dangled around his ears. While he struck up and down at the hazel bush, he felt that his crown was harder than it had been. This feeling permeated his whole being and gave him an inebriating sense of pride and strength. He pushed himself harder against the bush, and this coating was torn off in long pieces. The naked white wood could be seen, and in the unfamiliar open air it quickly turned a rusty red. Bambi was not able to care about that. He saw the pale flesh of the wood flash up under his movements, and that enchanted him. Here in this round place there were many other hazel bushes and dogwood bushes that showed the marks of his efforts. "Have you nearly finished, then?" said a cheerful voice from nearby. Bambi threw his head up and looked around. There sat the squirrel with a friendly look on his face. Bambi and the squirrel were nearly startled by the woodpecker who, sitting close in to the trunk of the oak tree, called down, "Oh, please excuse me, I always have to laugh when I see the two of you like that." "What is it then that's making you laugh so loudly?" asked Bambi politely. "Well then," thought the woodpecker, "you're doing the whole thing wrong. For one thing, you ought to have chosen a tree that's stronger. You won't get anything from a thin little hazel bush." "What should I be getting then?" asked Bambi. "Beetles," the woodpecker laughed. "Beetles and grubs. Look, this is how you do it." He drummed on trunk of the oak. talk, 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 talk. The squirrel rushed up to him and quarrelsomely asked, "What do you think you're talking about? The prince isn't looking for beetles and grubs." "Why not?" asked the woodpecker complacently. "They taste delicious." He bit into a beetle, swallowed it, and went on drumming. "You don't understand," the squirrel scolded again. "A noble gentleman like this has other higher goals to pursue. You just make yourself look ridiculous." "It doesn't matter to me," the woodpecker replied. "I don't care a thing about these higher goals of yours," he called cheerfully and flew away. The squirrel scampered back down. "Don't you know me?" he asked, looking very satisfied with himself. "I think I do know you," was Bambi's friendly answer. "You live up there," and he indicated the oak tree above them. The squirrel looked at him with a grin. "You're confusing me with my grandmother," he said. "I knew it. I knew you were confusing me with my grandmother. My grandmother lived up there ever since she was a child, Prince Bambi. She often told me about you. Only then she was killed by the polecat. A long time ago that was, in the winter-time. Don't you remember?" "Yes, I do," Bambi nodded. "I heard about it." "Well then, and after that my father moved in here," the squirrel told him. He sat up, showed astonishment in his eyes, and held both his paws politely on his white breast. "But you might also be confusing me with my father. Did you know my father?" "I'm afraid not," Bambi answered. "I never did have that pleasure." "That's what I thought!" exclaimed the squirrel in satisfaction. "My father was so surly and shy. He didn't have any contact with anyone." "Where is he now?" Bambi asked. "Oh," said the squirrel, "a month ago the owl got him. Yes, and now it's me who lives up here. I'm very satisfied with it. Just think, it was up here that I was born." Bambi began to turn and was about to go. "Wait," called the squirrel quickly. "I didn't really mean to tell you all that stuff. I wanted to say something completely different." Bambi stayed where he was. "What was that then?" he asked patiently. "Yeah, what was that?" The squirrel thought about it, then made another sudden leap, sat upright, leaning against his magnificent bushy tail, and looked at Bambi. "Right. Now I've got it," he continued to burble. "I wanted to tell you that you'll soon be ready with that crown of yours, and it's going to be very beautiful." "Do you think so?" asked Bambi, pleased. "Beautiful!" declared the squirrel, and in his enthusiasm he pressed both his forepaws against his white breast. "So high, so majestic, and such long, bright points. You don't often find them like that." "Really?" Bambi asked. He became so pleased that he went back to the hazel bush and started striking at it for a little while longer. The velvet was thrown around into the air in long strands. Meanwhile, the squirrel went on speaking. "I really must say that others of your age don't have a crown as magnificent as yours. You wouldn't think it's possible. Anyone who knew you last summer, and I did catch sight of you a few times in the distance, probably wouldn't believe you're the same deer. Such thin little sticks you had in those days." Bambi suddenly stopped. "Goodbye," he said hurriedly. "I have to go," and he ran off. He did not like being reminded of the previous summer. It had been a difficult time for him. First of all, after his mother had disappeared, he had felt totally abandoned. The winter had been so long. The spring came hesitantly, and it was a long time before anything green appeared. Without Mrs. Nettler, Bambi would not have been able to manage, but she had taken him in and helped him in every way she could. Nonetheless, he often found himself alone. He missed Gobo all the time, poor Gobo, who must now be dead like the others. Gobo was continually on his mind at this time, and it was only too late that he realized how lovable and he had been. He rarely saw Feline. She always stayed close to her mother, and turned out to be remarkably shy. Later, when, at last, it had become warm, Bambi began to recover his mood. He wiped his first crown clean of its velvet and was very proud of it, but a bitter disappointment was soon to follow. The other crown wearers chased him away whenever they saw him. They pushed him away angrily. They would not tolerate him going close to anyone, mishandled him, until, with every step he took, he was afraid of being found by them, afraid of being seen anywhere, and he crept along the most hidden paths with a feeling of being oppressed. At the same time, while the days became warmer and sunnier, he became gripped by a strange unease. His heart became ever more oppressed with a yearning that was both painful and welcome. Whenever he happened to see Feline or one of her friends in the distance, he was overcome by a storm of excitement that he could not understand. It even happened quite often that he would recognize just a trace of where she had been, or that he would draw in breath to test the air and smell that she was nearby. He felt irresistibly drawn to her ever more often, but if he gave in to this longing that drew him to her, it always turned out badly. Either he would find no one and, in the end, tired out after wandering about for so long, have to acknowledge that the others were avoiding him, or he came across one of the crowned heads, who would immediately leap out at him, hit him, push him, and drive him away, shouting insults. Worst of all, Rono and Karos had taken against him. No, that was not a happy time. And now the squirrel had stupidly reminded him of it. He suddenly became quite wild and began to run. The tits and the wrens flew out of the bushes in alarm as he went past them and asked each other urgently, "Who's that, then? Who was that?" Bambi did not hear them. A pair of magpies laughed nervously. "Has something happened?" The jay was cross and shouted, "What's going on?" Bambi paid him no attention. Above him the oriole flew from tree to tree. "Good morning, I'm happy." Bambi made no answer. All around him the thicket was already light, and the rays of the sun ran through it in fine beams. Bambi did not bother about that. There was a sudden loud rattling sound from near his feet. A whole rainbow of gorgeous colors flashed up and shone into his eyes, so that he was dazzled and he stopped. It was Janello, the pheasant, who had shot into the air in startlement because Bambi had nearly stepped on him. He rushed away, scolding Bambi as he went. "Unheard of!" he shouted in his cracked, crow-like voice. Bambi was bewildered and watched him go. "Well, it's turned out all right, but you really were being very careless," said a soft, twittering voice from nearby on the ground. It was Janaline, the pheasant's wife. She sat brooding on the ground. "My husband was terribly alarmed," she continued, dissatisfied, "and so was I. But I can't move from this spot. I can't move from this spot. Whatever happens, you could very easily have trodden on me." Bambi was slightly ashamed. "Oh, I'm sorry," he stuttered. "I wasn't paying attention." Janaline answered, "Oh, please, maybe it wasn't quite that bad. But my husband and we're so nervous at present. You understand." Bambi understood nothing at all and went on his way. He had become calmer now. All around him the wood was singing. The light became warmer and more golden. The leaves on the bushes, the grass on the ground, and steam rising from the damp earth took on a sharp aroma. Bambi's youthful strength swelled up in him and stretched out into all his limbs so that he became quite stiff. His movements became hesitant, as if he were something artificial. He went over to a small elder bush and, lifting his knees high into the air, he struck against the ground with powerful blows so that clods of earth flew up from it. His fine, sharp, cloven hoof cut the grass away that was growing here. Wild peas and wild leeks, violets and snowdrops. He scraped them all away till the earth lay before him quite dashed and bare. With each blow a dull thump could be heard. Bambi caught the attention of two moles who had been tumbling around at the roots of an old privet bush. They looked up and watched him. "But that's just ridiculous what he's doing," whispered one of them. "That's not how you dig." The other raised the fine corners of his mouth into a jeering grin. He's got no idea, that's obvious, but that's what you get when people do things they don't understand. Bambi suddenly stopped, lifted his head up high, listened, and looked around at the undergrowth. There was a flash of red between the twigs. It was unclear, but he could make out the points of a crown. Bambi snorted. Whoever it was, creeping about there, Rano or Karis or anyone else, go at him! I'll show him I'm not afraid of them anymore, he thought. It was as if he had suddenly been taken over by his own exhilaration. I'll show them that I'm the one they should be afraid of. He ran into the bushes with such force that they rattled, the branches cracked and broke. Now Bambi could see the other deer in front of him. He was not able to recognize him because everything was swimming in front of his eyes. He could think of nothing but that he should go at him. With his crown lowered deep, he stormed forward, gathering all his strength into his neck, ready to strike. He could already smell his opponent's hairy coat, could already see nothing in front of him but the red wall of his flank. Then the other made a very gentle movement. Bambi had expected him to stay still, but he was robbed of this advantage when he rushed at him. His antlers met nothing but thin air. He nearly fell over, but he staggered, pulled himself together, and swung back round to renew his attack. The he saw who the elder was. Bambi was so surprised he lost control of himself. He would have been ashamed to simply run from the spot, although that was what he most wanted to do. And he was ashamed to stay. He did not move. "What's this, then?" the elder asked quietly. His deep voice, at the same time so relaxed and so imperious, drove itself, as it always did, straight through the center of Bambi's heart. He remained silent. The elder asked again, "What's all this?" I thought," stammered Bambi. "I thought it was Rano," or he became silent and dared to look shyly at the elder, and as he looked he became even more bewildered. The aged one stood there, motionless and powerful. His head had by now turned perfectly white, and his dark, proud eyes shone from their depths. "Why not against me?" the aged one asked. Bambi looked at him, filled with a remarkable enthusiasm and shuddering with a mysterious thrill. He wanted to call out, "Because I love you!" But instead he answered, "I don't know." The aged one looked at him. "I haven't seen you for a long time. You've grown big and strong." Bambi gave no answer. He trembled with joy. The elder continued. He wanted to test him and make his assessment of him. Then, surprisingly, he stepped very close to Bambi, causing Bambi much alarm. "Whatever you do, do it with nobility," the aged one said. He turned away, and in the next moment he was gone. Bambi remained on the same spot for a long time afterwards. Chapter 13. It was summertime and burning hot. The yearning began to rise again in Bambi, the yearning that he had felt earlier, but this time it was much stronger than before. It boiled his blood and made him restless. He wandered far and wide. One day he came across Feline. He had not expected to find her at all, for his thoughts were at that time very confused from all the restless yearning that had possessed him, and he had not realized she was there. Now she was standing in front of him. For a while he was speechless and merely stared at her. Then, awestruck, he said, "Feline, you've become so beautiful," Feline retorted. "Can you still recognize me then?" "Of course I can still recognize you," Bambi exclaimed. "We grew up together, didn't we?" Feline sighed. "It's been so long since we saw each other." And then she added, "People can become complete strangers to each other," but she said it in a teasing way, simple and elegant, like she had used to do. They remained together where they were. "This path here," said Bambi after a long pause. "This is the path I used to go along with my mother when I was a child. It leads to the meadow," said Feline. "It was on the meadow that I first saw you," said Bambi almost gaily. "Do you remember?" "Yes," Feline answered. "Me and Gobo." She sighed gently. Poor Gobo, Bambi repeated her. Poor Gobo. Then they began to talk about those days and frequently asked each other, "Do you remember?" It turned out, to their delight, that they both remembered everything. "Out there on the meadow," Bambi recalled, "we played tag, remember?" "I think we did," said Feline, and then she jumped away in a flash. At first, Bambi just stood there, wondering what had happened, but then he rushed after her. "Wait! Wait for me!" he shouted gaily. "No, I'm not going to wait," Feline teased him. "I'm in a tremendous hurry." And in short leaps she curved her way far across the bushes and grass. Finally, Bambi caught up with her, blocked her way, and then they stood quietly together. They laughed and were very contented. Feline suddenly jumped into the air as if something had stung her and leapt away again. Bambi rushed after her. Feline made a curve and then another, threw herself from side to side and got away from Bambi time after time. "Stay where you are," he gasped. "Just stay where you are. I've got to ask you something."